All right, we are here at my Vermihut indoor worm bin, and the first thing we're noticing is the paper towel that we put on top is completely gone. And the last time we were in here, we had kind of a little bit of trouble putting the lid on because it was mounted so high, and you can clearly see where they have eaten anything. And today, we're going to implement one surprising technique to use right before you rotate or harvest your worm bin, and it's surprising because it goes against everything I've ever told you. So stick around to find out what it is, and on the next video, we're going to rotate all the layers of this Vermihut. So let's dive right into the center where we put our feeding zone and see how the worms have done. And of course, immediately we're seeing some great red wigglers in here. Now I feed down the center right here, and that's mostly because it works for me for doing videos, but I also like it because it's the shortest distance for all the worms to get in here. But my son has a Vermihut, and he feeds in kind of a cross pattern every other time and sometimes in a diagonal. And you can also feed in the corners. It's whatever you like. I just want to make sure that you know you're not restrained by how I'm feeding them right down the center. But this is fun. Whatever was over here is where we are finding some worms. And sure enough, check it out. Little avocado worm ball. So let's go ahead and dump it out. There we go. Barely right there. Sure enough, lots of worms, and they have not even gotten to all the avocado that's in here in the 17 days it's been since we fed them last. And last time we were in here, we started with some shredded cardboard, then we went right in with our experimental food of dry goji berries, and then we put a big lettuce stalk on top of that. Next, we put in some grapes that I then tried to burst open, and then we put in the bulk of their feeding, which included banana peels, more avocado shells like the one I just turned over, some cauliflower, carrots, tangerine peels, and a couple of potato halves. We'll have to see how they did, a pear core, and an apricot. And then, of course, we added our worm chow, spent coffee grounds, and pulverized eggshell grit. And I just want to go under here and see how, besides the avocado, how that apricot did, because I don't think I've ever put that inside a worm bin, and we may just end up seeing the seed. Now, they are still actively eating, and we can see that, but we're not seeing a whole lot of the food whole. This, to me, looks like potato skin right there, and I didn't see any fleshy potato, and I also didn't smell any. I'll kind of look up at the executive producer, see if she smelt any, and she smilingly says no. So let's go over on this side and see what we've got right here. And oh, what is this? This is something different. This might be that apricot. Oh my gosh. Trying to think what else it could be. It could be a carrot just because it's long and fibrous down the middle.
You should smell it to see.
The executive producer wants me to smell it to see. Oh, not recommended. That is a nasty carrot. Oh boy. All right, let's see what else we got in here. All right, we've got some long-term food, which is the top of a banana. That is going to be in here a while. And we've got some banana peels themselves, and obviously those avocado shells. Now, in 15 more days, when we check in here again, we are going to rotate, and then this tray will be one below this to kind of cure and have the worms eat up everything in here, and that's when they're going to get to all this food that is left here, except for maybe the avocado shells. Those seem to last forever. So yeah, out of all that food that we put in here, it seems like just banana peels, that one piece of carrot, and that's about it. Oh, grapes. We put a bunch of grapes in, and here is the grape stem. So not finding any individual grapes so far, but I think that is about it for 17 days. Not too bad, not too bad. So I did feed a pretty good feeding, and I'm estimating that I have somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 worms in here. So you can see after about 2.5 weeks, this is what is left. Based on this feeding, I can feed just about the same amount because I do have a little bit left over, but we are going to give them a pretty decent sized feeding because this is going to be the last time we feed them. And stick around to the end because we're also going to do a top feeding of some various foods. Now, as we explore the sides, the executive producer mentioned that we also didn't see goji berries anywhere in here. So we are going to do a top feeding with goji berries and see just how long it takes them to get to them, because in my other bin, they also went through them, and that was, I think, somewhere around 23 days or so. So I want to see through that top feeding time lapse if they go for them right away. It's just a very unusual food food for the worms to be treating as a fast food. So lots of good stuff over here, and you can see we put some shredded cardboard on top, kind of in the cheeks of the bin, and they've gotten to it a little bit, but there is some more here than what you see in the feeding zone. Obviously, when you put bedding right under the feeding zone, the worms are going to attack it more. It gets juices. Certainly the microbes are going to help them out, and things are looking very good in here, so I am very happy with this bin. It is definitely ready to rotate. If we wanted, we could sift out castings. It's a little bit more moist than in my outdoor worm bin when I sift, and I just did a video on how I harvest that, and it's just really great castings for this stage. So we are going to go ahead and continue over to the other side and see how this side is doing. I don't expect it to be too much different, but let's see if there's any other foods or things we want to put down the center of our next feeding zone. And I'll collect some of this stuff, this avocado and the potato skin. We actually put 2 potato halves, and I didn't see the other half of skin. We may have just been obliterating it. You know what? Just as I say that, here it is right there. So that's interesting. Let's grab the corners and lift and mix. Now, I like to do this because I like to see how the worms are doing. I like to aerate it. You don't necessarily need to do this every time, especially if you're putting bedding in with every feeding, and it's very important that you put bedding in with every feeding. If you were to just feed, 1, they wouldn't get as much carbon as they needed, but 2, that is a good way to kind of build up ammonia and build up some like fermentation or rotting smells, and it will actually make your bin super moist, which just speeds up all those kind of bad chemical reactions that we don't want to have in the worm bin. We want the worms to eat the food as quickly as possible and to eat the food before it rots in a bad way. Certainly we want microbes to get to the food to help them break it down, but we do not want it to rot. By rotting, I mean that nasty smell that kind of old food gets. So things are looking good on this side. I will say there's just a great density of worms no matter where I go, whether it's down the center or on the sides. Lots of very happy proliferating worms that are definitely procreating and making more of their own, so that is fantastic. All right, so we have fluffed this up a little bit, and you can see it's up to the top, so that's good because I always want to add bedding every time to kind of help the volume. But now we are going to implement the one technique that I like to do right before we rotate, and that is to not add any more bedding. I always say never enough bedding, always put in bedding, but this is the one time I do not put in extra bedding. That is right before we rotate, just 1 feeding before, and before I harvest any of my worm bins that I harvest all at once. You don't want to add bedding because a little cardboard scrap like this, you know, could potentially take 2 months to 3 months to break all the way down to castings, and if you're about to harvest in about a month, you don't want to have any of this in your worm castings. So just a couple more things to put down the bottom here. Some avocado, banana peel, there's some of the potato peel anyway right there, and this looks like most likely some of the yellow squash, I think. So there we go. Right now I would usually put in bedding, but we're not going to do that. What we are going to do is put in some of my garden scraps, and this is just some kale that got overheated and spent. I'm here in Florida and we are in June, and this is just the time of the year where the gardens just aren't growing that well. This odd little clump of something is some beans that we grew, and we put it in a Ziploc bag and then froze it and thawed it out and froze it because we were going to put it in various worm bins and just didn't. So it's got a lot of liquid, and that liquid will go ahead and drain right into here to help the moisture. We'll go in with an apple core, some tangerine peels. We've got some onion skin, some more lettucey stuff. Of course, I always got to have a banana peel in here. Oh, and how about a banana? That sticker, we're going to see what happens to that sticker when we end up harvesting this bin. The banana over there, a tomato, and then some broccoli and some peppers right there, and then another apple core. And finally, we'll put a little bit of yellow squash, and then this cucumber from the garden, and I am getting the signal from the executive producer to stop feeding.
Forever ago.
All right, so in we go with some worm chow, just expired grains from my pantry. And here's another thing. If you are going to harvest your worm bin, you might want to just put worm chow in for the last couple feedings. You don't want to put a lot ever. You just want to sprinkle it in, but that's a way of kind of slowing down both adding bedding and food in preparation for harvest. Next, we're going to go in with some tea and spent coffee grounds, and that made a mess right there. It's just another food source for them and helps me to get more nitrogen into my garden. And finally, we'll go in with a little bit of eggshell grit right down the center. This is just some grit for the worms that helps break the bigger food pieces into smaller pieces within their bodies. All right, so now that we got the normal feeding out of the way, I'm just gonna bury this up and we are gonna go in with our top feeding and test all those different foods that I have, especially the goji berries. I am just so surprised. Goji berries are kind of a health food and they dry them out. I actually have some seeds, and at one point I had a little goji berry plant going, but then I just did not care for it right, so I'm gonna give that a try again. But I'm very interested to see how they do. Now, I don't know, that was a pretty big feeding down below. I don't know how quickly the worms are gonna come up here, but we will go ahead and do a daily check-in of them and see how they attack all the different foods. So here is what we had in mind. Now this right here is a Brussels sprout leaf, and it's a brassica, and I found that kale takes forever for them to get to and eat, so I want to test that against a piece of lettuce. And then we're just gonna test out some various foods. Here's a yellow squash. Got a carrot, we'll do an apple core, we've got a pepper over here, we've got a tangerine peel, got some onion, and then we have a couple pieces of broccoli just like that. So let's move these guys over and make room for our goji berries. So there we go, right there. We'll just make a little pile of them. I'm gonna put them down flat to the surface. Just see how they do. So this is fun. We kind of got 3 experiments in one. Right here, we've got some forbidden foods. We got a little bit of onion and a citrus peel. Here we've got the brassicas versus the regular lettuce. And then here we got the goji berries. And overall, we've got some other fun foods for them to try. One of the other things I like to do is put a little bit of eggshell grit just to show you how quickly the worms come up and eat it. It is so strange to me that this is usually the first thing to disappear. And I don't think the worms are going to disappoint. There they go, right there. And since you stayed this long in the video to watch this, let's give you a little sneak peek of what has happened so far. Pretty darn interesting. I can't wait to see what happens to everything by the end of the time lapse. And if you want to see a time lapse that I did of whole foods versus blended foods, check out this video right here. So I hope you're all having a great day. I hope your worm bins are doing fantastic. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.